uh, we'll start our session today by paying our obeisances to His Divine Grace Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada, the founder Acharya of ISKCON. Okay, so we were at chapter 3, and like we know, chapter 3 has 43 verses, and we did complete the first 3 sections of chapter 3, which is Karma Yoga, and we started a bit on the 4th section. So overall with the chapter, we saw how it starts with Arjuna's question to Krishna, his confusion as whether he should renunciate or he should act, or that is fight, right? And then we saw how Krishna explains, right, that for, doing his duty, the Karma Yoga is better than for Arjuna than, renunciation, right? That is better for him. And also we saw one of the important verses, which was, where Krishna talks about sacrifice, which was 3.9. So, doing sacrifices, he clearly mentions how, we can get both, as a result of doing sacrifices, we can get happiness and liberation. Right. And then we went ahead, where Krishna explains the cycle, right, where, he clearly mentions the Sloka, so the demigods and living entities, they are sent, and we have to cooperate and work together. So that cycle of sacrifice which we learned, where Krishna mentions that we, as per the Vedic scriptures, we need to perform our prescribed duties, our sacrifices, right? And if we perform that, then demigods will get happy and we'll get necessities of life. And once we get those, for example, rain god, right? We get rain, and then the food crops grow, and then we need to offer the sacrifice by paying it back to Krishna, right, by offering. And we saw the importance of eating prasadam in that section, which was 3.13, right? So how we also saw further that for Krishna calls them as thief, right? People who take the necessities provided by this nature, but does not pay back, right? Do not perform sacrifice, right? It's like, and we saw for Kali Yuga, the most important sacrifice which is prescribed for us is chanting the holy name. And then further in the last session, in the last bit, we saw how Krishna gives the example of Janak Maharaj, right? How exalted personalities like Janak Maharaj, they perform their prescribed duties, but at the same time they perform sacrifices, right? So why? Because such people, they don't really have prescribed duties, because they are self-realized, right? They have already undergone that purification of heart, right? But still they perform those for what? For setting the right example, right? And now today we'll continue with that section where Krishna talks of Nishkam Karma Yoga to set the right example, right? Now, he spoke about Janak Maharaj, that's where we saw it. So overall, this section, fourth section, we have kind of, to make it clear for us to follow. It's given, from Shloka 17 to 19. We learned it last time that, does not need to work because they are already purified, right? But yet they work, right? To set the right example, right? And today we will see the section from 25 to 32, the 2 boxes there, which talks about attached worker and detached worker, and then working for Krishna and following him. Yeah. So we'll see what this attached worker and detached worker is. So just to give a glimpse of it. So attached as in, detached worker, let's say that. Detached worker are detached to the sense gratification, right? Those are devotees, right? Attached are attached to the self, right? So, and what Krishna says, right, working for him and following him, not imitating. We'll see the difference, yeah, further today. So we'll get started with just continuing with the Shloka 20 to 24, where we learned about, one of the things about Janak Maharaj, right? We learned Janak Maharaj being set as an example. Now, today we see that not only Janak Maharaj, but Krishna also gives example of himself, which is really the key, right? So, Krishna engages in work, right? So can maybe Hari Krishna, would you like to read Shloka? Okay, I think there's some disturbance coming through. That's fine, Hari Krishna ji. I will read it. So we are reading about the second shloka. So Name parsthatasti kartavyam trishu loke kinchan nanavaptam avaptavyam varta eva cha karmani. O son of Pratha, there is no work prescribed for me within all the three planetary systems. Nor am I in want of anything, nor have I a need to obtain anything. And yet I am engaged in prescribed duties. Right? So we see here how Krishna, we know, right, that he's the supreme personality of Godhead, right? Um, and even though he's the supreme, still we see him doing his duty when he descends on this, earth, right? So we know that he's a kshatriya, right? And his, he's acting, he's doing all his duties, when he's descending here to establish dharma, right? He's doing several things like a common person can do, right? Like he's a kshatriya, he's a king, protecting his, citizens, making sure there is no adharma, as simple as even, bowing down to his parents, lifting Nand Maharaj's chappals, right? Padukas, and, giving it to him, and he also went to school, right? To Sandip Muni Ashram to complete his education, so several examples which we can give, his humbleness, we can see it. Even though he is the supreme personality of Godhead, still we see how without any, any glitches, how he performs, all his duties, even though he doesn't have to, right? He's the supreme Lord. He doesn't have to go to school. He's the essence of all Vedas, right? That's what, we know so far. So even though to set, why does he do all this? Because to set the right example, right? So someone may say that, okay, Janak Maharaj did all of that because, there was some purpose behind it. He wanted to gain something, right? That's why Krishna is, now putting his example here, right? So what does he have to achieve, right, in this world when he's giving everybody everything, right? He's the master of all universes, but still he's engaged in, performing work, right? Why? Just to set the example. Otherwise tomorrow, there are, people, right, who would point it that, oh, they will say that, Krishna did this and this, so why can't I do? Am I wrong in doing that? Right? So it is very important, that, and that's why Krishna, even though he doesn't have to do his prescribed duties, still to set an example, he does, right? And we will see here why Krishna also gives, in the next, slide, the reason why he does that, right? So, Jyotiji, will you be able to read this?
Yes, I can.
Yeah.
So for if I ever fail to engage in carefully performing prescribed duties, O Partha, certainly all men would follow my path If I did not perform prescribed duties, all these worlds would be put to reunions. I would be the cause of creating unwanted population, and I would thereby destroy the peace of all living beings. Thank
Thank,
you.
thank you. So it's very clear here, right? So he followed the prescribed rules. Otherwise, why? Because otherwise, common men would follow in his footsteps, right? Because he's the greatest authority, right? If the authority is doing it, then there is a leeway for everybody to take it. That okay, I can try, right? Okay, Hare Krishna ji, have just muted you because the disturbance was coming in.
Yeah, okay, Mata. Yeah, sure.
Okay, now it's better. Okay, great. So yeah, so from scriptures, especially from Srimad Bhagavatam, it is very clearly understood that it describes, we see the story where we see Krishna performing all his religious duty at home, as a husband, as a father, as a king, not only outside the home but also within home as a normal householder too. We see the story where Narad Muni visits and he sees that how Krishna's opulence, he had 16,000 plus wives, and each of them had their own palace, and how Krishna was present with each one of them, right, fulfilling all the householder duties for them, right? So that's why Krishna, even though he's so opulent, he's the supreme, still it's very clearly mentioned, right? He clarifies it that he's doing this, why? Because so that he sets as an example, right, and all men follow in due course, right? Now sometimes when we look at some stories of Krishna, pastimes, right, not stories, pastimes, we see superficially sometimes it may seem that Krishna is doing something which is maybe beyond our capability to understand. Why? Because of our imperfect senses, right? We are contaminated as conditioned soul. Our senses are contaminated, right? For example, his pastimes, like he's stealing butter, stealing as an action itself, right? So that one, or his pastimes with gopi, yeah, gopis. So people may say that these are there, but we need to understand it is beyond our capacity, right, to understand this, right? If so, if some class of people look at these examples, then we need to they need to understand that if they want to copy everything of Krishna, then why don't they just lift Govardhan Hill, or why don't they expand themselves like Krishna expanded during the Brahma Vimohan Leela, right? So Krishna is extraordinary, right? So in Srimad Bhagavatam, on similar lines, we see that Parikshit Maharaj asks Sukhdev Goswami. It is so Srimad Bhagavatam is mainly the conversation, right? Between Parikshit Maharaj and Sukhdev Goswami. So wherein we see that Parikshit Maharaj asks Sukhdev Goswami as why sometimes Krishna, being the supreme personality of Godhead, performs some acts which are not digestible, which seem externally to be maybe immoral or something like that. And then Sukhdeva Goswami, he explains that, as we are conditioned in this material nature, we are conditioned souls. So, so we should follow the instruction of Krishna and his devotees, but we should be very careful that we don't try to imitate, right? Can you hear me? I see a note from Jyoti Biji that the volume is low. Can you hear me now?
Yeah, yes, Mata. Yeah.
Okay.
It's
All
very
right.
low. It's very low.
It's
Can't
low.
hear properly.
It's okay for me, Nikita.
Okay.
Ask her to check her own thing, I think so.
Okay. Okay. Jyoti ji, can you just check your volume as well? I'll increase the volume from my end as
Yeah,
well.
now it's fine.
Okay. Okay. So yeah, I was saying that, you know, it's very important for us to understand that we have to follow Krishna's instructions, right? Uh, Rather than imitating him. If we want to imitate, then we have to make sure, you know, like I said, something like lifting the Govardhan hill, being 16,000 wives, you know, expanding himself to 16,000 plus, right? So these are all extraordinary activities. And we have to also understand that when Krishna is doing his pastimes, he's doing it in, you know, these pastimes of gopis and, you know, it's in a place, in a holy place like Vrindavan, right? Where, you know, it is fully, what do you say, the topmost. We saw the, you know, progressive stages of bhakti, right? So Vrindavan is a place of complete prema. It is completely transcendent. Yeah. So it is beyond the, you know, rules and regulations. Yeah. So these are some of the reasons, you know, which we see Dev Swami's in Bhagavatam, also some of our acharyas. Yeah. So moving further, we are correlating that with a example so that it can sink in better. Yeah. So what is, can somebody say? Can you see the screen with some picture on it?
Yes, Mataji. It's a traffic
So
police
what is it?
officer.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Prasad. So it is a traffic police van, right? Now, sometimes we see these police vans, you know, traffic policemen, they come in the wrong direction. It's standing in a wrong direction, right? So they drive in a wrong direction, for example, without following the traffic. And sometimes we also see they break some traffic rules, right? Like drive faster than the limit, right? So, so sometimes to protect law, right? They are bound to fall, to not to follow the law, right? They are the person who are the lawmakers, right? So they are beyond this law of which is made, right? So they are the lawmakers, and we cannot, you know, just because they are driving in a wrong direction, they are not following the traffic signals, they are over speeding, doesn't mean that we imitate them, right? We have to follow the rules and regulations which are prescribed by them, right? But we should not be imitating them. Then, you know, we'll be behind bars, right? So it's similar to what we were trying to explain when it comes to Krishna's pastime, right? He's the lawmaker of this overall universes, right? So he's beyond the law, right? And to make it again, you know, it's just highlighting few pieces on the next slide, where, you know, some top bullet things, right? A leader has to teach the public how, not by just speaking, but by practically living with those behaviors, right? So the teaching can be more effective when we can see the example in front of us, yeah, with that practical behavior. So even Krishna, you know, for that sake, he engages in work as there will be dire consequences if he fails to engage carefully in performing prescribed duties. Yeah, he says that in the prior sloka we saw that all men will certainly follow his path, and he would thereby destroy peace of all living beings, right? So he has to live that with his own example, right? And the second thing is what we just said, lawmaker is beyond law. Yeah. So although Krishna teaches us how to perform, but sometimes he also acts independently of the law. To why? The main and the only reason is to please his devotees, right? That is also one of the key reasons why he appears, why he descends, right? To uplift his devotees, right? So, and to spend pastime. So such actions, however, are not to be performed by those inferior to him, like us, you know, conditioned souls. And it is the most important, from understanding the top two, it is very important for us to digest that there is a difference between following versus imitating. Yeah. So Krishna like I said, he did several pastimes, right? Because they are, exalted personalities, right? They are transcendental. So, and that's why we should rather try to follow the instructions given by them rather than imitating certain specific example, just picking one example and imitating that. Yeah. So, okay. So moving now to the other section which we had, which was attached worker and detached worker, right? So today we'll be doing this from 25 to 29 and then 30 to 32, the other section which Krishna says to follow him. Right? So now we have just given the split of the verses between 25 to 29 to make it easy to follow. Yeah. So Shlok 25, 27 and 28, they talk about what is the difference between an attached worker and a detached worker. Yeah. And 26, 29 talks about how a devotee should not be dealing with should be dealing with a non-devotee. So it describes how a detached worker deals with an attached worker. Okay. Now we'll talk a bit more about this, looking at the shlokas, right? So next, Shloka, can I request Prasadji, will you be able to read it?
Hare Krishna Mataji, but I can't see the sloka here because I'm at home.
No,
I'm
no
not
need
at home.
to, no need to have the shloka. You can just read the English translation.
Okay.
Yeah, yeah.
Right, Hare Krishna. Act without attachment to set an example. As the ignorant perform their duties with an attachment to results, the learned may similarly act, but without attachment for the sake of leading people on the right path. Bhagavad-Gita 3.25. Thank you. Hare Krishna.
Thank you. So, see, we have discussed before, right, that in prior sessions that how two people um externally being in same profession, they are in same profession, they're doing the same activity, and they look similar externally, right? So a Krishna conscious person or a devotee might look the same as a non-Krishna conscious person externally. Yeah. And but the difference is, we learned, it's not the action, but it's the intention. Yeah. So a Krishna conscious person may be doing the same activity, that profession, that activity, with an intention or with a consciousness, keeping Krishna in center. Like, I can, it's like they're not very attached to results, right? There is so the difference between them is, one is acting to gratify, one's own senses. Yeah. Whereas a devotee is acting for pleasure of not self, but Krishna. Yeah. The difference is in consciousness, right? A consciousness of working in order to provide your family, a good Krishna conscious life, you know, to develop in that, to provide the family with basic needs, so that they can do their Krishna conscious activities, nicely, is different to a consciousness of a non-devotee who is working only for self gratification, to fulfill self, yeah, like buying it's like luxury, excess, right? Not must have, but nice to have things, right? So that is the difference on the mentality, right? And that's why Krishna is highlighting here, he's calling a attached worker as an ignorant, because they're attached to material things, their desires are material, right? So they perform their duties with attachment to results, right? And a learned, which is a devotee, without attachment, right? So we may, will see further that we also attach attached to results. It's not that we may not be, the devotees may not be, but the attachment is towards, keeping Krishna in center. Attachment is towards, making sure that we get our family, we get the result so that we can utilize that result for Krishna conscious activities, right? We'll see this a bit later as well as an example. Yeah. So now we had this slide. I have repeated this slide because it correlates, what we are learning right now. We had this in one of our 9 sessions, right, where we spoke about actions versus intention, right? So good or bad, how do you determine it? Not by action, right? Something like charity, shooting, all of these we discussed before. So action by itself is not right or wrong, right? It's right and wrong or good and bad depends on more on the intention behind that action, right? And we, wherever we are, we follow certain standards, right? In our office we follow something as standard operating procedures, right? SOPs. That's are the different policies in different organization. So any organization you have to work with, you have to follow certain policies, that is like a manual for you how to act, right? And similarly for anything like gold, right? We look for that standard, set of standard, right? Hallmarking, which gives us the assurance that this is the right thing, right? So similarly in our life we have, for us as humans to follow what standard rules and regulations we need to follow. These are mentioned in Bhagavad-Gita, right? So action by itself doesn't determine it's right or wrong, good or bad. Yeah. So we need to have a clear thing that's why we talk so much about consciousness, right? Consciousness plays the key role, right? So sometimes, and this is what Prabhupada is highlighting, in the next, in the purport of this section. So Reshma ji, will you be able to read this purport of 3.25?
Yes, Mataji. A person in Krishna consciousness and a person not in Krishna consciousness are differentiated by different desires. A Krishna conscious person does not do anything which is not con- conducive to the development of Krishna consciousness. He may even act exactly like the ignorant person who is too much attached to material activity, but one is engaged in such activities for the satisfaction of his sense gratification, whereas the other is uh, engaged for the satisfaction of Krishna. Therefore, the Krishna conscious person is required to show the people how to act and how to engage the result of action for the purpose of Krishna consciousness.
Thank you. Thanks a lot.
Well,
So yeah, again, I hope it is pretty clear that this is very important for us to understand, and it's very practical, right, to understand a devotee's approach versus a non-devotee's approach. Yeah, devotees always think, about Krishna. Non-devotees always think about self, right? Yeah, and it is practical. See, all, like I said, all of us are working. Yeah, and all of us are in that kind of leadership position on our own ways, in our own ways, right? Even non-devotees are working, right? But when a devotee, when they are working, they're not hyper attached to the results, result of the work, which is like, for example, promotions, and you understand, right? You are not hyper attached to them. It's not end of the world. It's not causing frustration, right? It doesn't mean that devotees just quit the job and they sit idle at home, because we have learned inactivity is not approved by Krishna, right? We may be attached to results, but with a mindset of like utilizing that salary to fulfill our basic family needs, and also to, provide, to do, like we learned our quota, to perform some Krishna conscious activities for ourselves, right? So it's like, utilizing our results, like our salary, part of it, giving it as, for Krishna conscious activity. We learned that as part of our quota, right, last time, that like we offer food, and part of the food we offer it to Krishna, the entire food becomes, prasadam. Similarly, salary, if there is a percentage of, we utilize for Krishna conscious activity, like maybe donation, book distributions, then that the whole thing will become so sanctified, right? So it's like not just working for sense enjoyment, like buying more luxury items, heaviness in there, right? So we have to understand very clearly, the purpose is not to stop the activity, but to dovetail our desires, our consciousness of performing those activities, and, dovetailing it to Krishna, right? So desire plays a key role, and that's what we are going to learn today. How crucial is desire? Do think about the right thing. That's the thing. Yeah. So we'll move further. So don't disturb the ignorant. Krishna is saying this, right? We saw that Shloka 3.26, and we saw that 3.29, right? It talks about Krishna highlighting that we should not disturb the attached worker. Yeah, devotee should not disturb. Yeah. So this shloka, we can see, a person here in the picture, how they're so stressed, frustrated, hogging around, stretching themselves. Why? Because all is because of the results, right? They want those fruitive results, which is making them stretch, right? So, okay. Na buddhi bedam janayed agyanam karma sanginam joshayed sarva karmani vidvan yuktah samacharan. So, as not to disrupt the minds of ignorant men attached to the fruitive results of prescribed duties, a learned person should not induce them to stop work. Yeah. Rather, by working in spirit of devotion, he should engage them in all sorts of activities. That is for gradual development of Krishna conscious activities. Right. So, as a devotee, what Krishna is saying is we need to gradually get the non-devotees upscaling rather than going with an extreme approach. Yeah. So a child, we know that it's everything in life is a gradual process, right? As basic as a child um, learning to walk, it's so gradual, right? And we keep gauging, right? We keep challenging the child, gauging their capacity, and then we gradually encourage them to start walking another step, right? It's more of encouragement, not heavy, that kind of pressure, right, to go to that extreme, right? It's like we always give this example of smoking cigarettes, right? A person smoking cigarette. Now he goes to the doctor, and when he goes to the doctor on looking at the possibility and the actions, to quit the cigarette, right? So doctor will never ask them to immediately, quit smoking, right? But it's a gradual process. The approach would be that he first asks, say this, if this person was smoking 20 cigarettes in a day, so the doctor's approach would be to get him off that, with maybe initially reducing it from 20 to 15, and then 15 to 10, then 10 to 5, and then 5 to 2. And so it's overall going to be a gradual piece, right? So we should similarly have a gradual approach rather than the extreme approach. That's what Krishna is saying here, right? We all have our prescribed duties, right? And we should perform those. Yeah. But like, for example, as mother, we should perform our duties for our children, right? But the difference between a non-devotee and a devotee would be that the devotee takes care of the children with the knowledge that they are, they are given to us by Krishna as a responsibility, as our responsibility to grow them and to nurture them and to have them shaped up in Krishna consciousness, not just by material desires, right? So along with our prescribed duty, which is our dharma, right, we should also do what we have been learning in third chapter. The key thing is yagna, right? And what is yagna? Fulfilling that, dovetailing that prescribed duty into Krishna, right? So if we just do our duties as a mother, fulfilling the material needs of the children, right? Then what will happen? We'll get more and more entangled, right? The demands goes on increasing, and we do get more entangled in this material world cycle. And if we get more entangled and we get more bonded, yeah, then we will have repeated birth and birth death cycles. So unless we don't dovetail, our activities and our consciousness, first our consciousness, right, and activities, that our ultimate goal is to achieve Krishna, yeah, and and perform sacrifice, yeah, and develop our nurture our children in Krishna consciousness, then we are actually not just nourishing their bodily needs, but also mainly their soul nourishment, right? So it's very key for us to remember that we should be performing as devotees our dharma, for sure, yeah. That dharma should be dovetailed as yagna, right? And that's what Srimad Bhagavatam and Bhagavad Gita, both the keys, the scriptures for us explain, right? So sorry, it moved too fast. So can I then, I think we have Kavya ji join us. Kavya
Yes,
ji, will you be able to read
yes,
this?
yes, Nikita Mataji. I'm not able to see. I'm seeing 3.26 Sloka. Is it the one?
Do you see the next slide with ignorant?
Yes, now I can see. Yeah.
Okay, okay.
Ignorant people cannot appreciate activities in Krishna consciousness, and therefore Lord Krishna advises not to disturb them and simply waste valuable time. But the devotees understand the Lord's purpose and approach ignorant men to try to engage them in the activities of Krishna. Hare Krishna.
Thank you. So this is from the purport, right? And book distribution is one of the activity which we see so active, right? And I heard somewhere, I don't remember, but that Prabhupada's books are explosives, right? They can explode anytime. That's how it is. So they can attract people to get into Krishna consciousness at any time point of your life. So it's natural that we all undergo different kind of waves, right, in our life, ups and downs. We undergo depression, anxiety, frustration at some time point of life. And whenever we undergo that, I think one thing we realize is, for sure, is temporary and fragile things are. Everything is so temporary and fragile, right? And we just always think if we could have a permanent solution, somewhere. So, and in India, we see that these books, whenever you ask anybody, most of them would say, yes, we have these books, Bhagavad-Gita. Yeah, we do have it at home, right? They are so, we at least know that as Indians, that whether we take the next step of opening the book and reading it or not, but having the, Bhagavad Gita book in itself, just at home, it's so holy, right? We know it is gonna create a sanctified atmosphere, right? So with just having the book at home, you never know when you get an opportunity, when we are in that phase of life, to open it and start deep diving. And how with maybe a devotee association, we get that personalized touch which makes us understand real aspects of life, and to come out of that material anxiety which we will be always in, right? So we never know when a person at some time point picks up this picks up Gita and they start their life in spiritual journey, right? So we, again, highlighting that it is advised not to disturb, the ignorant, but rather again the attitude of gradual upliftment, right? So with that, we'll move to 27th shloka, which is very important. So Hari Krishna ji, will you be able to read it? Just checking your issues.
Yes, Mataji, I'll read. Which should I read?
Okay. It's 3.7. Can you see it on your screen?
3.27.
2.7.
Oh, I am not able to, I am able to see only the purport, like now I am able to see.
Okay, it's slow. Okay, yeah. Mhm.
प्रकृतेः क्रियमाणानि गुणैः कर्माणि सर्वशः अहंकार विमौढात्मा कर्ताहमिति मन्यते. The spirit soul, bewildered by the influence of false ego, thinks himself the doer of activities that are in actually carried out by the three modes of material nature. Hello.
What is this? Yeah, can you hear us?
Yeah, yes.
Okay, thank you, Hare Krishna ji. So the shloka says Prakriteha kriyamanani, right? So Prakriteha is the material nature. Yeah. Kriyamanani is the activities being done. Gunaihi is the modes of the material nature, modes of this Prakriti, right? So Prakriteha kriyamani gunaihi sarvasha. Actually, it is done by Gunaihi, which is the modes of material nature. They do it. Karmani is activity. Sarvasha means all, right? So actually, it's the modes of material nature who is doing, all kinds of activities, right? Ahankara vimudhatma. Ahankara is what? We know. So our false ego, right? Vimudhatma is bewildered soul, right? Due to the false ego, the conditioned soul or bewildered soul thinks kartaham iti manyate, thinks that he is the only doer. He thinks that he's the only doer. So that's why, this false ego, we saw how it is the thickest layer, right? We saw that it is the subtle one, the most thickest one, because it is the most closest to the soul. So here Krishna is clearly saying that because of this false ego, the spirit soul is completely, bewildered, that thinking that he's the only doer, whereas actually the activities are also carried out by the three modes of material nature, right? So modes of material nature, we learned it in one of the sessions, of 9 sessions. So it might help you if you can, go back and just refresh yourself, because there was one full session on these three modes, how they influence us, and how, like you can see here on the picture, we are like puppets in their hand, right? So these are described, modes of material nature are described in detail in 14th chapter and also 18th chapter. We see, how we see in detail how these influence and how we can see we all under a kind of mixture or different combinations of these different modes of material nature. and these three modes of material nature, it is nothing but mode of goodness, mode of passion, and mode of ignorance. And how each one of us have, like the different shades of n number of colors we have. Similarly, it is like, we have this different combinations of these material modes within us, right? So one thing, the key thing, what is the takeaway in this shloka is that we need to understand very clearly that soul is not the only doer, right? But it is rather one of the doers. Right? We'll see further in today's session how there are at least, on top level 3 different doers, yeah, for which, activity, for an activity, right? And the role of the soul is only to initiate an action, to only desire, yeah. The role of the soul is only to desire, right? And then, there are the other doers who plays the role in order for desire to have a result. Okay, so we can maybe look at this example. I know that the screen sharing is a bit slow. Can you see a picture on your screen with where we see, a woodcutter having an axe and cutting the tree?
No, Mataji.
Not yet.
Not yet. Okay, I'll just give it a minute.
Yeah, we can see now.
Okay, thank you. So in this picture, we are seeing what? A woodcutter having an axe trying to chop the bottom of the tree, right? So if I ask you that, to the or the woodcutter, who is cutting the tree? Both, right? Both are important. Without one, the other one cannot, work, right? So both are independent, right? Like we desire to pick up something, right? Only when we desire, our hand moves or leg moves, if we want to speak, only when we desire inside, we speak, and then, the vocals work, right? But what is the main thing? We need desire in order for that to move, right? And then we need the coordination between the different things. First is desire, and then coordination so the activity happens, right? So similarly, our role is to desire, right? And we have our own. We will see in next shloka that. Sorry, yeah, I'm just moving the slide. Yeah. So as a jiva or as a soul, what do we do? When we say that we are the only doer, we have certain class of people, right? Who I'm the universe, I am everything, I can do anything, right? So actually, what is the role? What is, when we talk about soul or jiva, what does it, is it only doer or there are several other doers? You can see on my screen a picture which shows what jiva does, what super soul and the material nature does.
Yeah, yes, Mataji. We are able to.
Okay, thank you. So see, it's very clearly mentioned here, yeah, that as what is the role of the soul? The jiva desires, right? And based on the desires of the soul, the super soul within us, verifies and sanctions based on what we deserve, and then once the super soul sanctions, then the order is passed to the material nature and they execute it, right? So these material natures, like we know, they are, sattva, raja or tamas, that is goodness, passion and ignorance, and they work according to the instructions they get from the super soul to act on that desire, right? So it's like a combination. And we'll learn more about this, further in 18th chapter and also in 5th chapter. 5th chapter, we see it more, where they split it further. So for Jiva, it's very clear that we are not the only doer. Yeah, we will always have that, kind of free will to desire. We have been given that power by Krishna, right? That free will to desire something will never be lost. And that's why we say the consciousness plays a key role, because that desire we should dovetail, that free will which we have got from Krishna. Instead of utilizing and desiring that free will for something material, we should desire it in, we should dovetail it for Krishna. And we also, can correlate this with an example. Say, for example, a child, a child is asking for a chocolate, right? Now the child is desiring to have a chocolate, but when the child desires, then say, child's dad or mom, they grant, they give money, right? Okay, they hear the they hear the child and they evaluate, and then, is it okay or not, then they give the money to the child. Now, even after getting, first of all, getting permission, and even after getting the money, child cannot go and get the chocolate on its own, right? So say a help is given to the child, someone is accompanying the child to go to the store and to buy that chocolate for the child, right? So it's similar cycle here. The child is the person who desired it, right? And the parents, they verify and then they sanction it. And then that help which was given to the child to go to the store, that is material nature, which sets it up in such a way that we get our desire. Whatever sanction they have got, they follow that and they get it. Yeah. So with that, it is clear that we are not the only one. It's us, the super soul, and the material nature, right? Three factors. So I'll just go up. I think we have just a few slides left. I'll go a bit quick. So 3.28. So one who is in knowledge of the absolute truth, mighty armed, does not engage himself in the senses and sense gratification, knowing well the difference between working in devotion and work for fruitive results. I think we discussed this, right? Before. Yeah, and next slide on the screen should be 3.29. And Jyotiji, if it is appearing, can you read it?
Yeah. So, bewildered by the modes of material nature, the ignorant fully engage themselves in material activities and become attached. But the wise should not unsettle them, although these duties are inferior due to the performance lack of knowledge. Bhagavad-Gita 3.29. Hare Krishna.
Thank you. So again, Krishna is saying here, right, not to disturb the ignorant, because they kind of have a thought process of their own, right? And they will try to, it will not sink in if you try to go in and you try to explain. It's like a default setting in their mind, right? And because they have that default setting, they will always think that they are right. They think that like we had seen, my way is the right way before, right? So we as devotees, like we discussed before, we should try to have that gradual upliftment. We had the same approach before for Vedas, right? What do Vedas, they cater different all the different ladders of yoga, right? From karma kanda until the end. Why? Because it kind of, it's a gradual upliftment, right? Making the non-devotee slowly into Krishna conscious activity, right? So similarly, we as devotees should have that gradual upliftment, gradual push for the non-devotees as well, right? So right now we come to the last three slokas from 30 to 32 for today, titled as Working for Krishna and Following Him, right? And this is one of the most important shlokas again for third chapter, where Krishna is highlighting very directly than he did before. So it is like Mai Sarvani Karmani Sanyas Adhyatma Chetasa Nesir Nirmamo Bhutva Yuddhasva Vigata Jvara. So therefore, O Arjuna, surrendering all your works unto me with full knowledge of me, without desires for profit, with no claims to proprietorship, and free from lethargy, fight. Yeah. So Krishna, we saw that time the famous shloka of 2.4 Karmanyavadikaraste, right? He clearly mentioned there the first level that do your duty without attachment to results, right? In that. Then we further came on second chapter where Krishna gradually again, slowly he used the word matparaha. If you remember, we spoke a lot on that, right? Matparaha devotees like Haridas Thakur and all. So he that he mentioned about matra, that is gauging senses onto Krishna, right? And then we saw in this chapter only 3.9 where he highlighted doing yagna, right? If you don't do yagna, then it will cause bondage. Yeah, he never so far said specifically do it for me. But in this shloka, you will see now first time he's saying that do your duty, surrendering all your works on me, right? He say mai sarvani karmani, right? So that's why it is very, yeah, it is the first time Krishna is saying that, surrender all your work to me, yeah, without desires for profit, right? Without that ownership, proprietorship, that, I am, I am, because of me, myself, this thing is happening. No, so it's all because of Krishna's mercy, right? So with that, we can give this as an example from a cashier. We used this example again before with our 9 sessions, right? So when we see that shloka which says nirashir nirmama, nirmama means not, mama means ownership, right? So not having that proprietorship, right? And nirashi in that shloka means that, following, that orders of your master. Yeah. So that is without desires or profit, just following the orders of your, master. Yeah. Without expectation of results, right? So why cashier? Because we see that a cashier's job is such that they may count millions of money, right, for their employer, right? But they do not claim even a percentage of that money, even a bit, right? And we see that people come to, deposit money, but they are not really, they are not the extreme and that they're happy that someone is coming to deposit, nor when people come to withdraw money, it doesn't affect them, right? Because they know that it's not mine, right? So they have that mindset. So similarly, we should realize that nothing in this world belongs to us, to one individual person. Yeah. And everything belongs to Supreme. Krishna says, right, in 5th chapter, we went through that shloka several times, Bhukta Ram Yagnatapsan. So he says that he is the supreme enjoyer and supreme, controller, right? So that is the real thing, So when he says in the prior shloka, do surrender all your works unto me, right? This is when we act in such Krishna consciousness, then certainly we know, we have a clear mind that everything belongs to Krishna. I have just been given the responsibility accordingly, right, to take care of things, right? And that will not give us the mindset of that proprietorship over anything, right? So that is linking to then nirmama, means nothing is mine, right? Everything is given by Krishna, right? So with that, we will move to the last shlokas for today. And Jyotiji, will you be able to read it?
Sure. So those persons who execute their duties according to my injunctions and who follow this teaching faithfully without envy become free from the bondage of fruitive actions. But those who out of envy disregard these teachings and do not follow them regularly are to be considered bereft of all knowledge, befooled and ruined in their endeavors for perfection. Hare Krishna, Bhagavad Gita 3.31-32.
Thank you. So this is followed by the prior verse. We have to remember, right? So when he's saying Mai Sarvani Karmani, right? So it is unto me, right? Do or surrender all your works unto me. That's what he is saying. Now he's saying that those who follow him as per that verse, then they are free from bondage, right? Again and again, Krishna in Bhagavad Gita, we have seen there are two factors. He's highlighting here enviousness, right? So in our two factors which are key for our spiritual development in our lives. First thing we learned was faith, right? And second is having that non-enviousness for Krishna, right? Krishna is highlighting non-enviousness here particularly, right? What is it? So like we just learned about claiming ownership, proprietorship. No, I am doing, I am the doer, right? We don't want to have that understanding that it's actually Krishna's. That in itself is envy, right? That we don't want to accept that. That means our faith is not 100% on Krishna either, right? We have to have the mindset that, Krishna is everything. He's giving us everything, all the necessities of life. And nothing, in fact, is ours. We can, if everything was under control, we wouldn't feel so insecure every moment, right? To lose things, right? And if we think that, no, this is mine, this is mine, and, I have control of everything, that in itself shows the lack of faith and that envious nature, right? So envy can be, it's like, for example, in today's world, I when we see a person getting into spirituality, we see a class of people where uh, I think quite a lot of parents, right, or family members, in today's world, they want, when they see someone getting into spirituality seriously, they have the thought process that, they are doing more for, Krishna and not really giving enough attention for us, right? That thought that we will get less, we will be in low priority in their list, isn't that itself an envy, right? So the thought process that Krishna is everything is a must, right? So we need to understand that very nicely for our gradual upliftment, uh, you know um, and of course it cannot change drastically, right? It's not an, we always say it's not an overnight thing. It is a gradual process, right? So we need to just make sure slowly, steadily, with that consistency, we dovetail our desires, right? We saw how desires play a key role. So how we can dovetail our desires, our activities for Krishna. Yeah. And Krishna is explaining here, so for those who disregard his teachings, you know they are bereft of all knowledge and they are befooled. Yeah. And they're ruined in their endeavors for perfection. It's very clearly stated, right? So in next slide, we are just giving examples, that results of following Krishna's teaching. We are free from the bondage. We have given the example of Arjuna, Parikshit Maharaj, and then the 32nd shloka, which who are disregarding, they are befooled, ruined, right? And it's important then to understand that, say today, if, do you think that, if a person is aware, right, that doing this would be sinful, and the resultant punishment would be this, would they stop committing that activity? We ourselves might be facing, right? We do something and we know that it is not right, but can we stop ourselves next time? Not necessarily, right? and and we are talking about much more, sinful activities, right? So we need to, why can't we? because we need to understand that these activities, these are impelled, by us from our strong habits and impressions we have had from our past lives, right? So, for these non-devotees, they are not even aware of the punishments of the repercussions. So how can we even, it's the worst stage, right? And that's why we'll end today's session by just looking how habit, how habit plays a key role, right? So, it's like this is a kind of a cycle again, where, it all starts with thoughts, right? Like we learned before. Everything, we think about something, right? And then it starts with thoughts, which we learned before, right? In 2.6. That dhyato vishayan punsa. So dhyato, so contemplation is the one which starts, right? So you start having the thoughts, then you contemplate, you meditate on those thoughts, right? And after, contemplating, you end up doing that action. And when we do that action, say we have, based on the experience we get some nice experience, and that develops as an habit, because we want to do it again, right? When we experience something, we do it again and again, and that becomes a habit, right? And that habit increases tenfold when we have such association. So when we are keen, when we are driven to certain kind of habit, we tend to see that we would like to have people around us who have similar habits that interests us more, right? That gives us happiness, that gives us pleasure, right? So that association plays a key role, because we develop that habit, to find people who have similar area of interest. For example, a smoker might, would, have that kind of association built more, right? Someone else who smokes, right? Or a person who is so much into habit of, reading, they might like, have association with someone else who is doing. That's why even in spirituality, we always highlight how association plays a key role for us to keep on track, and especially consistency and that stability. Yeah. So and that association, that habit will eventually, make our thoughts again only in that kind of thought process is set as standard, right? Even if somebody comes and tries to make you understand, it will not shape, because that becomes our default setting, like we discussed before. Yeah. So the whole cycle starts again with thoughts. Yeah. And that's why we learned before how it is important for our thoughts to be sanctified, right? When we saw that purport from Prabhupada, that some, Krishna conscious activities like eating prasadam, chanting, how it is sanctifying, our whole system, our brain cells, our hearing, our heart gets purified, so that eventually, the thoughts or the desires then would eventually transform, right, with those activities. So it is very important for us to dovetail those thoughts in the right channel. Yeah. So with that, I think, we'll conclude today's session, and we will open the floor in case anybody have any questions.